Hi everybody, welcome to Livewire Review. My name's Jeremy and we're here for another weekly podcast on the electrified future. If you're checking this out on Spotify, I highly recommend you go over to our YouTube page. It's at youtube.com/@LiveWireReview. There's a lot of good stuff there. There's reviews, there's mechanical tips, and of course you'll find these podcasts there as well. And we've even recently started interviewing industry leaders. So there's a lot of neat stuff there. Go check it out. So this week, I don't really have a structured set of topics to talk about. It's just a few things I found in the news and I wanted to expand upon them. So we're gonna start off with the Ford $25,000 EV. Now I know I mentioned that last week, but I just wanted to say a couple of things that I found out. There's two names that I wanted to mention. Alan Clark and Doug Field. I know I talked about Doug Field when I talked about Ford and the Tesla connector and how wonderful he was in helping history moving forwards with that EV connector. Now, he's the technology officer. He's in charge of all the infotainment systems and how all the technology works together in the vehicles. And Alan Clark is part of the project for the $25,000 EV that Ford is making. Now, Alan Clark is a former Tesla executive, so he's going to be able to help Doug Field and the rest of the team work out some of the problems that they're having, some of the integration that they're having. So EVs have to be more integrated than gasoline-powered cars because there's gas stations everywhere, so you don't really have to think when you get in a gas-powered car. So the EV experience has to be the same, and this is where Alan Clark and Doug Field are going to come in, and they're going to save the day. I think the next Ford EV that's coming out after 2026, the $25,000 EV, hopefully they can keep it in that price point, is going to be the best one that they make yet. And that's because with these two people working together, they're going to be able to integrate that technology into it. So my prediction here is they're going to have improved connectivity in the GPS. And when I say improved connectivity, I mean, I believe these two can really hit a home run. I believe that they can set it up so when you get in your car and you want to go somewhere, all you have to do is enter it into the navigation system and you're going to get there. It's going to route you over to the chargers that you need to get to, but it's going to be even better than Tesla's system, because they have access to the Tesla superchargers, only version 3 and version 4. So of course they're going to add that to their GPS system so that you can route to the superchargers. And with Doug Field and Alan Clark working together, they're probably going to add technology in there where it's going to be tracking if vehicles are going there or if the charging station is available. And this is the kind of stuff that we need in EVs. Now, I know that they are probably going to go a step further and work with the charging companies. This is my prediction. I really do hope they're going to do this. Like, let's say if you go up to an Electrify America charger, Electrify Canada charger, in these GPS systems, it should be able to tell you if that charger is available, how many of them work, and be able to route you there, you know, like with the GPS, and do exactly what a Tesla does. Warm up the battery on the way there. Have accurate estimates of your range. These are the kinds of things that are going to make the next generation EVs a hit or a miss in the market. So if your EV is behind the times when it comes to that integration, you're not going to make it. The legacy automakers will not be able to make EVs if they cannot integrate this kind of technology in their car. This is why 70% of the market is Tesla, because it's so easy to get into those cars and drive from A to B. This next point is really short. It's actually about VinFast. My partner Matt was actually mentioning that VinFast will likely make it in North America if they focus on cheap and reliable first. Now, that's kind of a differing opinion on the rest of the market, and I myself questioned him when he said it, and I was like, why did you think VinFast is going to make it? Like, I don't understand. So they offer a 10-year, 200,000 kilometer warranty. And it's run by a Vietnamese billionaire who has lots of cash to burn on this business. So they can make it through that teething period with these cars. So I know the reviews have been really bad on VinFast. The test drive vehicles that they've given have been broken. But that is part of the teething pain of starting a new car company. It's very, very difficult to start a car company. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out and buy VinFast stock right at this moment. I'm just saying keep an eye on them. See how they're going to do in the future. They have a vast dealer network. They're able to charge quickly. They're willing to take risks. That is the number one thing a company has to be able to do in order to succeed, especially a new car company. You have to be willing to take risks. And I think VinFast is the company that's willing to do that. We were at the Canadian International Auto Show, and we had the reveal of the VF3, the really, really small electric car that they're bringing out, and also the VF Wild. That thing was a crazy looking pickup truck. It had a mid-gate in it. It looked to be a really good size for what most people need, and I think it's going to work for a lot of people. It's just they have to work out their production issues. They have to learn how to make the body of the car fit together properly and seal up all the joints, just like all the other automakers do. And if they can do these things, they're actually going to make it. VinFast is going to be a real company. I know we laugh at them now, but I think Matt's onto something here. This next part is about charging. There's actually 2 sections about charging here. I'll talk about some of the new chargers on the market later, but right now I actually just wanted to talk about per kilowatt hour billing, because everybody wanted per kilowatt hour billing. When I went over to PEI last year for my video, you actually saw the costs. If you check out part 2 of the road trip to PEI video, there's a lot of costs that I cover in the end of that video. And per kilowatt hour billing is something that came out this year. And just for an example here, IV charging. IV was something that I choose to use when I'm leaving Ontario, or the network that is at the 401 stations. And they were charging 27 cents per kilowatt hour last summer when I went on my road trip. And that was time-based usage, so all I did was I took the math backwards, figured out how many kilowatts I got, and I arrived at 27 cents. It was the cheapest charging I had on the entire trip. 27 cents per kilowatt hour was excellent. So right now, it's 62 cents per kilowatt hour. That's almost 3 times as much. It's about roughly around just over double. And that's a lot of money for charging. And that's pretty standard across the board. If I look at the Tesla supercharging network, if you are a Tesla owner, you pay 61 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's right in line with 62 cents per kilowatt hour. If you were a non-Tesla owner on the supercharger network, you pay 82 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, this is different in different parts of the country, so you actually have to check your charging stations and see what they're like. But what I'm discussing here is the fact that per kilowatt hour billing is actually a lot more expensive than it was when they were doing time-based, especially if you had a fast-charging vehicle. It was not great for those vehicles that were slow charging, let's say like a Chevy Bolt or a Nissan Leaf or a Hyundai Kona. They paid a lot more when it was time-based billing. Per kilowatt hour billing might work out to about the same price for them. But any car that can charge quickly, like a Tesla or an Ioniq 5, it's a lot more expensive than it used to be. So keep an eye on your costs. For example, the Tesla supercharger was 46 cents per kilowatt hour last summer when we were traveling across the country in our Tesla Model 3. Last thing to add there is Chevy is adding plug-in charge availability, but it's only with the Flow network. So hopefully they add some more networks so it's a lot easier to pull up to a charger, just plug in and go. It's part of the Tesla experience. This is why they have 70% of the market. You just plug in your car and go. There's nothing to think about. Ford uses that with the Ford Pass app. You can just, well, actually, no, sorry. If you use the Ford Pass app, you have to go in and select your charging. But they have a charge and go system where it's with a bunch of different networks. You just plug in and go. And I believe they're also doing that with the Tesla network too. So it's pretty handy. This is the kind of thing that needs to be built into legacy OEMs for their EVs to sell. So another piece of news that's out there is Honda. Honda is switching who they're going to be working with. Honda says they are now working with Nissan for their EV technology. And I believe this is a really smart move. OEMs moving forwards, it takes about 10 years, if you look at the Tesla model, for a company to get comfortable making EVs. EVs are expensive to make, especially in the beginning. You lose money on every single car that you build. It takes a long time to get to that profitability. So you actually have to eat up a whole bunch of your company's capital working to get this technology. So Honda working with Nissan is a very smart move because Honda only has some technology in hybrids. They don't have the technology to build an EV. And if they tried to use all their resources to build EVs, they might go bankrupt in the process. It's quite expensive. History lesson, going back, Toyota developed the hybrid technology back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they invited other automakers to purchase the engineering for that technology from Toyota. So let's look at a Ford hybrid, for example, for this history lesson. A Ford hybrid uses the same two-motor setup in their transmission with a planetary gear in the middle to drive the wheels. This technology is what was designed by Toyota. Now, a lot of people have a misconception that Ford uses a Toyota transmission in their car and just runs it, and they just buy that. It's not true. The Ford actually makes their own transmission, but they use the technology from Toyota, the ideas, the engineering, all of the ideas that were required to make that excellent transmission work, and then they just make their own. So every time, for a while there, every time Ford sold a car, they would actually have to pay a small amount of money to Toyota for using their engineering for hybrids. So moving forward, we're going to be doing the same thing with EVs. I believe Nissan and Honda working together, they'll be able to pool the capital required for the engineering to make excellent vehicles. Now, Nissan's already ahead in that department. They already have a liquid-cooled Nissan Ariya, and they've been building the air-cooled Nissan Leaf for over a decade now. So that means they have experience in this market. They've found out what works and what doesn't, and they'll be able to move forward from there. And that is very interesting because that leads into Nissan. Nissan is revealing 16 new electrified models in hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and full EV. They're going to be using modular platforms with shared technology across those platforms. Just like the eGMP platform for Hyundai Kia, where they can stretch it and shrink it, change the number of battery modules, and they can build anything on top of it. Think about it. We have the Kia EV6 and the EV9, the Ioniq 5, and the soon-to-be Ioniq 9, and they're all built on the same platform. Even the Ioniq 6 is built on that platform, but it has a shorter wheelbase, and it's a shorter car. So it's all the same stuff underneath. It's a modular platform, and Nissan is moving towards that modular platform as well, which is very cool. They're going to have a mix of different battery technologies moving forward. They're also going to be using LFP, which is lithium iron phosphate, NCM, which is nickel, cobalt, manganese, and also a future solid state battery is going to be put into the mix in their EVs, which means that they're going to have different price points that you can buy these cars at, just like you can with their gasoline-powered cars today. So I believe that news is excellent. I love the fact that you have choice in the future. The future is going to be a mix of so many different technologies, and it's really great that Nissan is hopping on board, and they're going to make a modular platform with different types of batteries. One of the promises they have is they're going to reduce their fast charging time by up to 50%, which is a big deal for me because when I review cars, honestly, the size of the battery is not usually my deciding factor. It needs to be a certain size to get me a certain distance, and usually my breakover point is if it reaches 400 kilometers. And that's why we bought the Hyundai Kona. I do like a little more than 400 kilometers, but the Ioniq 5, for example, has a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery. It's going up to 84 this year, but right now it's 77. It always won with me when we did a comparison test because the charging speed. The charging speed was 18 minutes in good conditions. The Nissan Ariya was 43 minutes. 43 minutes is a long time to spend at a charging station between your stops. I found 20 minutes is just about perfect. 20-25 minutes is about the max that you want to spend at a fast charger when you're on a road trip. It's enough to go to the bathroom, get your snacks, and head back to the car. 43 minutes, now you gotta kill some time. You maybe have to go to the park with your kids, watch a movie. You gotta do something else. 43 minutes is too long. So cutting that time by 50% is a big deal to me. And the last thing, they are going to reveal by 2028 all these different models that they're bringing out and have cost parity between their EV and ICE by 2030. Now, I find that kind of funny because last week when I was doing my predictions, I actually said that the cost parity was predicted to happen in 2027, but I said that it's not going to reach the consumers until 2030. And Nissan is right on board with what my prediction is for that cost parity between ICE and EV by 2030. So keep an eye on the market. I think over the next few years, you're going to see the prices of each get closer and closer as time goes on. This next one has nothing to do with cars. I'm only bringing it up because the name of our channel is Livewire Review. And I gave you the link, youtube.com/@Livewire Review. And I said that specifically because you can't just enter Livewire Review into the search bar and find our channel because of a certain motorcycle on the market, the Harley-Davidson Livewire. Now that one came out a few years ago. So the news this week is Harley-Davidson Livewire division has a new motorcycle coming out called the S2 Mulholland Cruiser. Now, I don't know much about motorcycles. I've honestly never ridden one. I like four wheels. Even when I'm in the dirt, I like an ATV. So I just a couple of specs here. It's going to have a 121-mile range, which is about 200 kilometers. And I think that's just perfect for a motorcycle. You get out for your 3 to 6 hour ride. And it's got a 0 to 60 time, about 3.3 seconds. It's a Harley. That seems to be pretty in line with what they can do. Comes with 84 horsepower, but 194 pound-feet of torque. Now, on a motorcycle, that sounds great, but from what I've heard from my fellow coworkers who both ride Harley-Davidson motorcycles, excess torque comes with one problem, especially in the rain. If you can't control that rear tire, you're gonna wipe out. So there is a couple technologies in here. It's 432 pounds, just to mention that. It comes with recycled and sustainable materials in its build, but most important for me is the fact that it comes with anti-lock brakes, traction control, and most importantly, slip control. So when you're in the rain, it should be able to control those wipeouts. EV conversions have become a little more popular than I expected lately. This is still a very, very high dollar affair. So if you're gonna be converting your vehicle to an EV, you're going to have to check a lot of different markets, and there's so many different ways this could be done. It's just like restoring a classic car. It could be anywhere from $30,000 up to $500,000 depending on what your budget is. So EV conversions are no different. It's usually a high dollar affair. But just for example here, I heard of a company called Blue Force Energy EV Conversion Kits, and that is a Canadian company in Richmond, British Columbia in Canada. And you can reach them at 604-722-5033. Just give them a call and maybe discuss any EV conversion ideas you might have, and they'll see if they can help you. Another one I came across, this one's in the States. It didn't actually have an address on the site, but I believe it might be out of Texas or something. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, of course. You might have heard of this one. It's called Revolt Systems. This one, the website, you can get them at revoltsystems.com, and you might know them for Tim Allen's 1934 Ford Victoria EV. They're doing a few video series on there. They actually have their own YouTube channel, so you'll be able to check out how they build it, but it's pretty neat. They have an 85 kilowatt hour Tesla battery pack that is scattered across different parts of the car. And then, of course, they have the electric motor driving the rear wheels. And what I found really neat is the fact that some of the modules on the car are made by a company called AEM. And AEM is very well known for the tuning market for ICE vehicles. So it's pretty neat to see AEM moving over into the EV conversion space. They have lots of different modules on Tim Allen's 1934 Ford that are running all sorts of different systems, like battery management systems. And I think that's pretty neat. So the way they set up the battery in this car is they actually had to put it in many, many different places, but they also connected all the cooling systems. So this 34 Ford is liquid cooled, and they've balanced it in such a way that all the modules get to the same temperature at the same time. They've done a lot of work on this car. So follow that build. I think you're gonna find that pretty interesting. I know I did. The next one I came across was a little less sophisticated than Tim Allen's 1934 Ford. It was a Ford Galaxy 4-door, but it caught my attention because of the way they built it. It was done by a company called Conductive Classics in Idaho, and they've done 2 major EV conversions so far. I think they had an Apache pickup truck, a 58 Apache, and they used what they learned from that one, and they moved on to this Ford Galaxy. Now, they took a wrecked Tesla Model 3 Performance, they took out the rear performance motor, and they took the battery pack. And what I found very interesting about this conversion was they took those systems, but then now you need a way to drive them. You need a way to make them into an EV conversion. You can't just slap all the parts from a Model 3 into another car. Well, you might be able to, but it's a little more difficult. So what they did instead is they used a module from a company called Enginext. And Enginext is out of Quebec in Canada. They're a very unique company. They've actually programmed modules that you can buy right off their website that allow you to drive a Tesla drivetrain or drive unit in your EV conversion. So it has all the CAN communications to it. It allows you to hook up to an accelerator pedal to it. And you can also plug into I believe you can plug into the BMS for the battery. So that means they were able to take the battery and put it in the Ford Galaxy. They had to do that by cutting out the center section of the frame, and they made a very wide frame that the battery was able to bolt to right in the middle, and they custom fabricated that frame up to the front and rear end of the car. So the Model 3 battery pack is actually right in the middle of this four-door Ford Galaxy conversion, and I thought that was really neat. So that means you didn't intrude in the interior space at all, and the best part was you could actually take out the rear seat and access the charger and all the stuff that you could in the back of the original Tesla Model 3. It is such a neat conversion, so much simpler than some of the other ones I've seen out there, but I love it. And I love what they said in the show. He said nobody was going to save this car. It's a four-door car that came with, it was a very small V8. It was not fast. It was not exciting. It wasn't one of the two-door muscle cars. So cutting up this classic, it was okay, you know? We saved two cars in the process. We saved a wrecked Tesla Model 3 Performance, and we saved a Ford Galaxy that nobody was interested in, and we made it into something cool. And of course it does burnouts and it does donuts, and it's the neatest thing. So moving on from that, I just wanted to mention one more company out there. This isn't about EV conversions, but I don't know if you've heard of it, Mountain Pass Performance. It's another Canadian company here. They sell something called the Party Box. You have to look that up on their website. There are disclaimers about that. But they sell performance tuning parts for Teslas. They have been road racing and doing track days with Teslas for years, and they sell suspension components to make up for their control arms that have the weak bushings. They make alignment fixing suspension parts. And what I found really interesting is they also make a limited slip differential for the Model 3. So you would have to drop your drive unit down, you have to open it up, and you have to get to that differential and install a limited slip. But the fact that it's open differentials in a Model 3, I think that's really neat that you can put a limited slip system in there. Or if you were using one of their drive units for an EV conversion, you can add limited slip to it. And that's really neat that we've come to this level of EV tuning already. And we've only had EVs, like compelling EVs on the road, since about 2019, really. Because before that, they were kind of short range, and Tesla was the only other player out there that had long range EVs. So from 2017, 2019 to now, we've already come up with this tuning market, and I think that's pretty sweet. This one's very short. It's just about vehicle to load features and the Pro Power onboard that you find in Ford vehicles. There are so many posts on Facebook of people who have relied on their cars for a week. Let's say they were in Prince Edward Island or Nova Scotia or something, and a storm went through. The people who had just recently bought Kia EV6s, Ioniq 5s, and Ford Lightnings were powering all the essentials in their home. People were able to keep their sump pump running. They were able to power a kettle. They were able to run the lights and the TV and get their internet going and stuff like that. And that's what you can do with the V2L system. The Lightning owners were going a step further. They actually had 240 volt output and up to 9.6 kilowatts of power. And with that huge battery, you can run things for days and days and days. One owner, in fact, he was running his sump pump, he was running his heater because he had the 240 volt. He was running the well pump, and that's one of the most important things. Well pumps are 240 volts. So his Lightning was able to power those systems, but his neighbor didn't have any power. He was actually able to plug into the front of the Pro Power onboard and run all the lights and TV in his neighbor's house as well. And it was only drawing something simple like 130 watts. It's just crazy what you can do with these systems. And I think more EVs need to come to the market with the capability to take power out of them as well as put power into them. It makes them a very usable asset. Because if you think how much a Tesla Powerwall costs to put in your home, and it only has like 8 to 13 kilowatts or something in it. Whereas you can buy your electric vehicle, which you already need a vehicle to drive from place to place, and then use it as your backup power system as well. So you don't have to invest in that extra system. It already has the inverters on board. You just have to plug it into your transfer switch and run your essential circuits. This next part is just a quick blurb about Tesla and some of the things that are happening because they've already been on the road for over a decade now. They're starting to get some cars that need battery replacements, and several Teslas are over 200,000 miles. I've seen so many Teslas in my Facebook feed that have, like, let's say 450,000 kilometers on them. Some have had 600,000 kilometers on them. Not too many. They've been through at least one battery. And there's actually one guy who went over 300,000 miles, I believe, still had his original brakes. You got to be in a dry place for that, but he still had his original brakes on his car. It was time to replace them, but he still had the original battery, the original drive unit, and the original brakes. However, he had been through a few suspension components, a couple sets of control arms, and probably the knuckles in the rear of the car. They're just a couple of the weak points in them. They used fairly cheap rubber in their bushings, and that's just a wear item in them. So outside of tires, control arms, and suspension, I'd say he got the life out of the car that he paid for, which is pretty neat. Tesla has already sold 100,000 units in Australia, and just recently they built their 6 millionth car. So there are 6 million Teslas on the road today, and that's a pretty big milestone for them. And the best part is that extra million cars, from 5 million to 6 million, I think it only took them about 6 months to build them. So they have really ramped up production. Quality has gotten better. It's not perfect yet, but it's a lot better than it was. And they can do their updates on the fly. And they've just gotten so much better over the years. And of course, that platform underneath is still the best in the industry. This one's more of a joke. Remember last week we were talking about the Ram charger? We were joking around at work, and I said, well, what if you put a nuclear reactor under the hood? Imagine if you had a Ram charger that had a tiny nuclear reactor charging the battery. Like I said, this vehicle is so modular. Like, they've already set up the drivetrain in such a way that they don't have to change anything for 30 years, I'd say. But the power plant that goes under the hood, you can play around with. It doesn't have to be a V6 engine. It doesn't have to be a fuel cell. Just imagine that crazy situation where you have, like, let's say a military vehicle that has to just keep going and going. Imagine a small nuclear reactor under the hood of a Ram charger, a Ram charger. That would be so cool. Okay, this next part's about Hyundai and Genesis. I'll start off with Hyundai has really hedged their bets on EVs. They really want to be one of the top 3 EV suppliers in the world forever. So they've just invested $50 billion to be one of the top 3 EV makers. So they're going to be investing that in engineering, in the factories that build it, and quality control, and everything that has to do with the EVs. That's pretty cool that they're putting that investment in. It shows that they're really invested in the future of EVs. The Genesis G80 and G70 won AJAC awards when we were at the auto show. I think that's pretty neat. It's just more awards for their brand. I know the Ioniq 6 has won awards. The Ioniq 5 has won awards. The Kia EV9 has won awards. The Kia EV6 has won awards. And so it makes no surprise to me the Genesis electrified vehicles are also going to win awards. Hyundai's fit and finish and the way they build vehicles is just so good, you can't ignore it. So part of the way they're dedicating to EVs is to make EVs fun again. So Genesis is also joining the party when it comes to hot EVs. And I'm just going to read this blurb right from their website. Meet the Genesis G80 Magma Special, the GV60 Magma Concept, the GV80 Coupe Concept, and X Grand Berlinetta Concept, comprising the Genesis Magma program. Together, they add a new dimension to Genesis, marking the brand's expansion into the realm of high-performance vehicles. While speed and performance are important, the Genesis Magma program will look beyond, prioritizing the driving experience to kindle the joy of sporty driving with effortless comfort. That's incredible. I love it. They have an entire performance brand of Genesis cars called Magma. And they're probably going to be using all the stuff they learned from the Ioniq 5N, the Ioniq 6N that's soon to come, the RN22E, and that Vision 74 concept. But I think the Genesis products, being their luxury brand, are just going to take it a step further. It's going to be more of an animal than the Ioniq 5N already is. And people who have driven the 5N say, I wouldn't buy an EV but I would buy this. Now that is a bold statement from somebody who doesn't like electric cars. It shows that the future of EVs is going to be fun, starting with the 5N and then moving on to Genesis with this Magma setup that they're going with. There's actually one more they come out with. There's something called the Genesis Neoloon concept. Now this one is an EV9 sized product, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest because their GV70 and 80, I believe, are built on an ICE platform. So their next generation cars are of course going to be on the eGMP platform, and the EV9 and this Neoloon are both going to be built on that eGMP platform that already exists. And since they already have the Kia EV9, which will soon be the Ioniq 9 as well on that same platform, the Genesis Neoloon, it makes perfect sense that it's also going to be built on that same platform. So it's going to be about that size. Check out that in the future. This next one throws me off a little bit. I didn't think that there was a market for battery-powered trains. I know we already have diesel electric trains that take transport across the country, but a battery train set a distance record. It's by the Great Western Railway, so you can check them out. They went 138 kilometers, or about 86 miles, without needing a recharge. And from the video, it was a 3-car passenger train. Now, I don't know anything more about trains, so you'll have to check it out in some other videos, but I just thought that was pretty neat, that you can have a battery-powered train. I still like the fact that in different countries, they run electrified trains like subways and high-speed rail that is electric. I don't know which country it is, but there are some trains in the world that run on wind and solar power, and they actually run about 600 kilometers a day just using renewable energy. And it gets passengers from A to B. It helps people get to work. You don't have to drive your car on a congested highway. So public transit in the future, I think this is the way to go. An electrified track that goes from place to place, it's probably a good investment, and it'll save you time, it'll save you money. These are just some new DC fast chargers that are going online soon. I know there's a lot more in the world, but these were just some of the ones that caught my attention this week. In Moncton, New Brunswick, there's a new 100 kilowatt hour charger at the Amsterdam Inn, and I believe there is more than one port at that charger. So it relieves some of the congestion downtown, because I've actually been to Moncton and I went to go find these chargers and they were right in the busiest part of the city. So it's nice to see chargers outside of that. And of course the Petrocan chargers in Moncton have been broken for a long time, and you have to go a little bit out of town to get to the Tesla superchargers. So it's nice to have another option there, and it's easier to get to. People are liking it already on PlugShare. In Miramichi, New Brunswick, there's a new supercharger online. So it's nice to see the Tesla supercharger network expanding there as well. And in St. John, New Brunswick, there's an Electrify Canada charger about to go online. The test charging was just completed on a Lightning, and it was pulling 170 kilowatts. Now, I find Electrify Canada is funny because I believe they use the same chargers that Petro-Canada uses and a couple other ones use. And every time they open up one of these 4-stall chargers, it's a very good thing that they have 4 stalls, because I've always found that at least one of them goes offline right away and needs some sort of repair. I think in British Columbia, there was one that went up, and as soon as it was open, there was already one down that had an error message on the screen. So we're moving forward. We're putting in more infrastructure. I'm just glad that there's more than one port at every station now. So at least you know you're going to be able to charge. Another supercharger is opening up in Mississauga, so that will alleviate some of the congestion, because Mississauga is a very highly populated area and there's a lot of Tesla owners there. So it's good to have more Tesla superchargers in the city center so that you can get on your way. There's another Tesla supercharger. It's almost done. This one's in Kitchener, Ontario, and it will be online soon. The biggest news this week, I believe, is Fisker. The Fisker Ocean you might have heard of. It's their new SUV that has just come out. The only problem is it's just come out, just got delivered to customers, and now the company is looking at bankruptcy. They tried to get some funding from some other OEM automakers, and unfortunately this week that did fall through. So the future of Fisker is not looking bright. They've actually stopped their stock trading. Last I checked this morning, it was at 0.02 cents for Fisker stock. So it's effectively zero, and you cannot trade Fisker stock right now. Unless somebody saves them, Fisker may die. So we have to keep an eye on that. So right now, they've actually lowered the cost of their vehicles significantly, all the ones in stock. And if they can sell all those vehicles, maybe they can get the capital they need to keep going. It'll be a real fire sale because they're about 37% off. It's incredible. They are now the cheapest SUV in the country that you can buy when it comes to electric SUVs. I got the prices here. Now this is American. I don't have the Canadian prices with me, but the Ocean Sport is now $25,000 American, and it can go 231 miles. The Ocean Ultra is $35,000. It can go 350 miles, and the Ocean Extreme is $37,499, and that can go 360 miles. Now these are some serious high-performance SUVs for these prices. So I don't know if I would recommend you get one though, because like, how would you get it serviced, and what are you going to do with the software? If you had a serious software issue, you'd actually have to re-engineer your car and contact companies like Nginext or EV West and have them literally go in and make a module for you to run the parts that are in the car. It would basically be like running an EV conversion, which, like any custom built car, is a difficult thing to do. So it's a great price, but it's also a big risk. Keep that in mind. This one's a very small piece of news. It is just a Daimler Freightliner EM2 box trucks are getting delivered. They are a class 6 to 7 box truck. Don't know much about trucks here, so I'm just reading the stats here. It's a medium duty truck. You can get 180 or 250 mile version, and they recharge 0 to 80% in about 60 minutes. So if you're running these trucks, you better have the right use case for it. It's not going to be able to travel across the country easily. You have to have a destination in mind, and when you're stopped to unload your cargo, you have to be recharging the truck to get to your next destination. So these are great for short haul deliveries of pretty heavy weight, because it's a GVWR of about 26,000 to 33,000 pounds. And yeah, that's all I have on the EM2 truck. They're getting delivered. I'm glad to see more electric trucks hitting the market. It's just they're not going to fill all the gaps, right? Like I said, EVs don't fit every situation. There's going to be a lot of different technologies moving forward. I came across an Auto Trader article that I don't know if I completely agree with. It was, do EVs really need all-wheel drive? Now, if you followed my rant from last week, you know I want all-wheel drive in every EV, especially here in North America. Now, if you're south of the Rust Belt, south of the area where there is snow, of course you don't need all-wheel drive. But I can tell you, I've actually come into a couple of situations where I really needed it and I didn't have it. And when you don't have it, you really, really want all-wheel drive. And of course, I came up with the perfect solution for this last week. So yes, it's true. A lot of EVs don't need all-wheel drive. Good tires and excellent programming are great, but I like the peace of mind of all-wheel drive. And I think that little tiny 7 horsepower motor is what most EVs need. You don't need a full-size drivetrain. You only need that little push to get you going. A little air-cooled system in the back, so you don't have to run coolant lines to it or anything. And it only runs once in a while, so it's never going to overheat. It's the perfect system for most people. It's not an off-roader special, but it gets the job done. I'm going to end this video with just my thoughts on some of the criticism of EVs. There was a tale that was told a long time ago, and I'm going to try and sum this up. 2 people were looking to buy a pair of boots. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50, but an affordable pair of boots, which were sort of okay for a season or two, and then leaked when the cardboard gave out, cost about $10. So $10 for cheap boots, $50 for good boots. Those were the kind of boots that this person always bought. The one who did not have enough money. So they only earned about $38 a month plus allowances. So back then it wasn't enough to buy the $50 pair of boots. So the only option they had was to buy the $10 pair of boots. And he wore them until the soles were so thin that he could tell where he was on a foggy night by the feel of the cobbles in the road. But the thing was, the good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time, while the other man could only afford cheap boots and would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. So this, I'm leaving this video here with the idea that not everybody can afford an electric vehicle. Now, I always praise them for the fact that they're very cheap to drive, they're very cheap to maintain. Speaking of the Hyundai Kona, a Hyundai Kona that's $44,000 in an EV form and $25,000 in the gas-powered form. It costs 27% less to own the electric vehicle in that case because it's so much cheaper to drive. Like, I'm living the benefits of it right now because I've already paid for the car. But that's not the case for everybody. Think of the person who will only buy, let's say, a $10,000 gas-powered car. In the end, because they couldn't afford or weren't willing to spend the extra money on the electric vehicle, they'll be spending so much more in the fuel costs of that car. And because it's a cheap gas-powered car, there's a lot more things that are going to break in that time. You're going to have to do the brakes more often. Suspension components are going to start to fail. You have to change the radiator. Your piston rings might give out and might start burning oil, and then you have to change the engine. There are so many more costs involved. So you got this catch-22 from the tail of the work boots here, where somebody who can afford an EV, they're laughing. It's great. Like, I'm saving lots of money. But the problem with that situation is not everybody can afford it. And when you have that situation, the gas cars are going to keep going because that's the cheaper option to buy outright, but is more expensive in the long run. And on that note, we come to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed the podcast this week. As always, I want to hear your comments. There's a lot of things in the EV world and the plug-in hybrid world and the hybrid world. I just want to know, what questions do you have? Did you find any news topics you want me to talk about? Please leave it down below. If you're listening to this on Spotify, I opened up the comments there. If you're on YouTube, the comments are, of course, always open, and I read every single one of them. And if you like this video or this podcast, if you're listening to it, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And thank you for watching or listening.